Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the U Talk Show. I still maintain this thing could be a podcast, and it is the second episode of Psych Week, where we examine the beautiful, fragile, and surprisingly easily influenced soup inside our heads. Everything that we are, and everything that we can be. Now, today we are sort of continuing on from our previous episode of how do we see the world. And we're coming up now to how do our life experiences, or our lived experience, as some people would phrase it, how do our life experiences change our worldviews? And Kyle has actually made some interesting notes on this and thinks that it's going to be hopeful. So, Kyle, please don't make me depressed.
I'm not going to make you depressed because okay, I've been kind of actually thinking about this a lot lately. Because by all means, I should be a
Yeah.
much worse person than I am right now. A much, much worse person. If okay, so let's take it from the top. So how do life experiences change our worldview is essentially the question. And I would say that it creates our potential for understanding, at least initially. So you gain your understanding from your experiences,
Mm-hmm.
from the people around you. From years like, 0 to 7, you're just kind of learning about the world. Basically, 7 to 14, you're kind of starting to shape kind of a view on the world. And that's where, that's where all the memories that, where that you get misconceptions from are. And then from, hopefully 14 to 21, hopefully you start to fix some of those as you learn about the world proper. So,
Okay, so the dev psych person in me is screaming at that, but I do have an anecdote that is probably from within the like 5 to 9 period of my life.
yep.
Um, when I moved to Sydney, I spent a number of formative years in Auburn.
Hmm.
And let me tell you that Auburn back then was not the glimmering beacon of delicious food and like boiled lollies that it is now.
Wait, that's Auburn
Um,
today? Oh wow,
yeah,
I don't know enough about Auburn.
Auburn,
I've lived near Auburn all my life, like here and
you
there
can
near it.
actually get a decent kebab in Auburn now and not contract food poisoning. It's amazing.
Oh, wow, okay.
Um, but
I
you
gotta
have
hit
to
me up some
understand
Auburn.
that I lived on Dartbrook Road. And I also need you to understand that the people surrounding me were overwhelmingly Lebanese and overwhelmingly mannerless fucking bastards. Um,
Okay.
I developed a worldview pretty early on that Arabs were just barbarous and had nothing to offer because
Interesting.
all the ones around me were violent twats. I later came to learn that many of those people had left Lebanon because there was a literal war going on, and any sort of integration was kind of very, very far down the list compared to surviving and being able to keep their family safe.
Yeah,
These
I mean,
people
war
left
messes
an
you up at the best of
environment.
times.
Yeah, these people left an environment where survival was not assured, trying to make sure that they could keep their family safe. And compared to the cultural norms of the Australia that they moved to, uh, they were mannerless thugs. But war shaped their worldview, and that exposure shaped mine. And it was something that I later had to challenge. And I've subsequently learned that the cultural differences, the surface area of the cultural differences can be absolutely hilarious. And that no, if you want coffee, you don't go to the Italians for it. You get the thick Turkish shit that kicks your ass and reminds you you're alive. Um,
Yep, yep.
and that's sort of a one of those formative ideas that I've carried forward, and that's one of those things that led to a false understanding initially. And when challenged, and we will get to challenging our biases, but when challenged, it was able to allow me a better degree of empathy for other people's experiences and why they saw the world the way they did, as well as me being slightly less racist.
Interesting, interesting. And when did you what at what point did you challenge that bias?
I'm not gonna
What age?
lie, shamefully late. I would have been about 19.
Well, see, that's still kind of where I was, and keep in mind those were just kind of rough ages that I was throwing out there. That's still between that 14 and 21, where you start to actually learn about things proper, you know.
Yeah, look, it didn't help that I went to Macquarie Boys High School, which is now closed, but was serving a majority culturally and linguistically diverse community,
Mm,
and also had a problem with violence.
mm. Yeah, I
That is not
couple
an
of
excuse of my failure to challenge my preconceptions, but it is a further example of how our experiences can shape and even reinforce our biases.
yeah, yeah. And that, that's it's very interesting, because like eventually when you were, oh God, okay, so the thought came to mind that like with age comes wisdom, but that's clearly not true as I've seen in many cases. With
Oh,
contemplation on life and the challenging of biases and the thinking about things in depth, that with that comes wisdom.
growing
Um,
old is mandatory, growing up is optional, is the way I've heard it. And I think a lot of people choose not to
yes,
grow up because there's a lot of psychological work involved. And we sort of
yeah,
hear that saying in the context of, people like Hugh Hefner, who in their advanced years are still going around like damn teenagers. But I think
yeah,
it
yeah,
applies to the mental energy of becoming a better person day by day.
yeah. And well, actually, speaking of that, that kind of brings me to our second note, because as you've seen and sort of demonstrated, and as I could demonstrate with a number of different stories, um, our experiences don't dictate our actions. Um, they like we and they don't dictate our worldview. They can reinforce it, they can influence it, they can facilitate it. But even if your experiences and your environment facilitates a worse worldview, you can do better. You can contemplate things more. My worldview, when I was young, formed into something that was incredibly closed-minded. Um, and then slowly, around from the ages like 14 to 21, I started to learn the world was more complicated. The that black and white morality just doesn't work. This idea that things are either
Mm.
good or bad. It's very much, it's like there are some things that are black and white, but there's also a lot of shades of gray. And on top of that, I had some very as horse just kind of looks for something.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had
Keep
some
talking.
experiences. Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm entertaining you while Horst is off doing something. Um, and so what I was basically taught a bunch of different things. Like alcohol was really bad. Now, too much alcohol can be bad for you, but a little bit of alcohol can help with stress relief, and it can do a fair bit for you. I was also taught that things like ADHD were you sort of a, it's whacking out, but wow, just
It's shrink
I should
wrapped.
have known.
That is the only defense I have. It's shrink wrapped. I've never read it.
There,
Thankfully, neither has anyone else
how?
because I don't want to deal with the biohazard cleanup.
Yes. Okay. So back to what I was saying, before I forget. So, I was taught that things like ADHD and sort of autism and all that, like my worldview was essentially, when I was young, in very much informed by my mother's. And my mother is just straight up wrong about a lot of things. And, in fact, even that's kind of an understatement. Um, look, I love the woman, but she's just she never challenged her worldview, and still to this day does not. And so, when I started challenging my worldview, essentially I was challenging her worldview, and eventually I found out that I have ADHD, And,
Wow.
having
Who
that
could have
conversation
guessed?
with her, yeah, having that conversation with her was really, really difficult. Because, I had to just straight up like shut her down and tell her, no, I have ADHD. It has been confirmed. This is how it works. This is the reason why such and such would happen often. This is the reason why I was constantly daydreaming. It's and why I couldn't pay attention for any length of time. And so, that being said, though, even though, my entire, worldview came from her originally, I've since become a very different person. I ended up being a lot like my father, which was very interesting because due to unfortunate circumstances, he was kind of out of the picture for most of my life. And then when I finally got to really meet the man and get to know the man, I found out that we're very much alike. We're both very curious people. We both contemplate a lot. We both consider things. I'm still terrible at meditating, but he insists that I give it a try. And, I try and fail with that. But, other than that, we're very, yes, yeah, I can't. I can't. Okay, I can meditate to angry music. That's the best that I can do.
Okay, that's fine. I'll get you some German hard rock. It's fine. Carry on.
That, you have my curiosity. Oh God, now I'm thinking of some very, very naughty sayings, or not sayings, proverbs, quotes from some abridged anime series, um,
Yeah.
which I will not quote because we're trying to keep it at the very least PG-13.
Sickened,
But that
horrified, and aroused.
I, I said PG-13, host.
That's
Anyway,
PG. We're using the medical term. As long as we're using the medical
fair
term, we
enough.
don't cross into M.
Fair enough. But yeah, so I mean that was kind of, I guess that's my weirdly presented story about how, our experiences don't end up dictating our worldview, because it ended up not dictating mine, even though I had some really crappy experiences. Even just the introduction of other concepts and sort of clear proof that like that worldview hadn't been thought through, caused me to rethink it. And right now I've more been struggling with the idea of whether or not, that was kind of innate to me, or whether or not I made a choice, or whether or not the making the choice was innate to me, or whether or not I just had the right influences at the right time. But then again, in some cases, I sought out that those influences and those differing worldviews. And so it's, I've been kind of wondering how much of it is my nature through genetics and the way my brain works and that, and how much of it is sort of nurture from the few people who were sort of nurturing in the idea of different worldviews and reconsidering things. Because I did
See,
have
I
a
think
few
that's I
male
think
role
that's your
models.
third point right there too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, which
the
which is basically that our environment, although our environment can facilitate um different worldviews and different beliefs, it doesn't, because it doesn't dictate it, we can do better than that. I can say that I certainly have, and I'm very, I'm not very much someone who has pride, but if I do have pride in anything, it's that I was able to, God, this sounds corny. I was able to rise above this terrible circumstances. See, yeah, I'm
I
kind
have
of
a
going off the
tarot
rails
deck
a bit
here.
now.
I have a tarot deck here. This is relevant, I promise.
Okay,
Um,
keep in mind
uh,
we're running over time now, so
that's fine. It is a
quickly.
non-standard deck, and so it has an interesting addition to the major arcana. That is, by the way, the title of my book of poetry, which I mentioned last, because it did end up being tarot themed. But it has an additional card in the major arcana, the Phoenix. Um, those of you familiar with the mythology of the Phoenix, and this is why I remembered this. I was imagining just an animatic of Kyle turning into a phoenix. The
Jeez.
little book that comes with it
Oh God.
describes it as an evolution of the Fool. The Fool, as a tarot card, is
Oh,
about
that
openness to
is so.
concepts.
I see why you're, because
Yeah,
that is so apt.
it is
That
about
is so
openness to
applicable.
concepts. It is about being able to see the world almost with the mind of a child, um,
Mm.
being able to understand the possibilities that unfold before us at any given time, and being able to embrace them, even if they go against what we think we can or cannot do.
Mm.
And the idea of the Phoenix
And on
is
that, sorry to
that
interrupt,
you
but really on that, one, okay, this is, I've had experience with people who do not understand this, and I've had experience with myself and this question. The answer is to the question of whether or not you can do it is yes. You can do quite literally anything. Anyone out there can do anything. It's just a matter of hard work, grit,
respectfully, I'm
determination.
going to submit the person with a shattered leg might not be able to walk right now.
Well, okay.
Like there are physical
Aside
bound
from the
like
obvious,
just let me
I'm
finish
talking
the
about
idea,
goals in
hey,
life.
because it
All
is
right, yeah, finish.
like the idea of the Phoenix as a major arcana is that you can go through life with this openness to new experiences, openness to things that you may not have considered possible or feasible without having to let go of the things you've learned entirely.
Mm.
It's sort of like if you open your mind too much, your brain might fall out, is the way I've heard it said. This idea
I
is
don't
that
get that
you
saying.
need to
I don't get that. Like, how does that
if
work?
you open your mind too much, you become susceptible to gibberish, like
Oh, okay,
anti-vaxxers and
okay, yeah.
Trumpers.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Um,
If you don't approach things skeptically, got it. Yeah.
yeah, this is the idea. The idea of the Phoenix is that you go through life with an openness to new experience and an openness to possibility, tempered by all that you have learned so far, so that you can
Mm.
approach situations with critical thinking, with reasoning, and determine, am I about to be taken for a sucker? That is sort of the we can do better than our environment facilitates right there,
Yeah.
because everything that you've learned, even if it was all pain, even if none of it was the nice positive reinforced learning that we like to provide,
Well,
you do carry it with you.
yeah,
And as
on
long
that,
as you can be better than everything bad that has happened to you, you are succeeding at being human. It is a human drive to learn and grow and improve and change.
yeah,
Always.
and I will say this, there are, if there's one thing I've learned about pain, there are two responses to it.
Keep it PG,
Either
Kyle.
I am keeping it PG. Either, so there's two responses to pain. I found it's um either I'm going to do better than that, and ensure that other people don't experience that, or that the people around me don't experience that, or I'm going to pass that on to others. Now, it is difficult, but it is most certainly the right thing. And everyone out there who's experienced pain, like myself, you can pick that first and better option.
In either case, when you experience pain, you learn from it. But the
Yes,
takeaway here is that you get to choose which lesson you learn from it.
like the Lion King, you can learn from it or run from it.
No,
That
you'll
is the
learn from
quote,
it
right?
either way. If you run from it, you will learn that you are weak and that you cannot face yourself.
Yeah, true. There's that. Okay, I was trying to end on an inspirational quote that everyone. That's all right. We
Choose
had
your
several there.
lesson.
We had several there. You said choose your lesson. All I thought was choose your own adventure. But that kind of
It's
is it.
kind of like that. It's
You
kind
know
of
what?
like that.
That's it. In life, you get to choose your own adventure, no matter the circumstances of your birth or your upbringing. So choose the best adventure. And with that, we'll end it. Thanks for watching, everyone.
I
Have a good one.
implore you to choose to come back for our next episode.
Yes, do
See you
that.
later, y'all.